Who else is looking forward to the Dragon versus Sakazuki fight? I know that Sakazuki killed Ace, and so there's a bit of bad blood there with Luffy, but Sakazuki has always seemed like ultimately he's going to be someone else's problem to deal with. Luffy has his own thing going with Blackbeard. Besides, Sakazuki's business really does seem to be tied to Dragon infinitely more so than Luffy. Even knowing the nothing we do about Sakazuki's relationship with Dragon, think about it from his perspective. You are the same age as the spawn of Garp, the hero, the embodiment of the justices. Garp is like Sakazuki's god and Dragon is his Jesus. But then instead of doing all of the salvation, Dragon betrays justice and dooms the world. It may have even caused Sakazuki to lose respect for Garp for bringing such a person into the world in the first place. And not only that, but eventually causing a second terror, that awful Luffy, to be spawned as well. In fact, I'm pretty sure I know Sakazuki's exact line of thinking. Monkey D. Luffy, bad man. Me, Sakazuki, good man. Kill Luffy, but grandson of Garp. How can bad man be grandson of good man? Confuse Sakazuki. Bad man for confusing Sakazuki, therefore Garp is also bad man. That's exactly how it went down. And from what we've seen, Sakazuki doesn't have, a whole lot of respect for Garp, but that's the man he became. That's not necessarily what he started out as, because Sakazuki shares a lot of Garp's mannerisms. They both have a preference for fine fistsome combat, and Sakazuki even shares Garp's taste in Hawaiian shirts. It could have been that the Dragon incident devastated Sakazuki into believing that traditional justice wasn't enough. I mean, what had established justice done for us? All it did was create the world's worst criminal, and so that turned Sakazuki to the path of absolute justice, having been disillusioned with what the hero of the world had to offer. So Sakazuki had to become his own hero, because otherwise, exactly who was Sakazuki looking up to? We don't really have an origin of absolute justice beyond him, at least not yet. Also, this video is sponsored by Katana Empire, high quality hand forged katana constructed in strict accordance with Japanese tradition. So here I have this absolutely stunning Enma. Oh, what a satisfying sound. So as a Zoro fan, look, I own a lot of swords. A lot of replica Zoro swords. In fact, I own duplicates of a lot of his swords. And in terms of sheer quality, absolutely none of them come close to this. These katana are constructed full tang, which means these blades extend perfectly into the handle. And my god, NL, you can feel the difference in structural integrity. They're primarily for decorative purposes and come with these beautiful storage boxes like this one containing Law's Kikoku. And Katana Empire has a wide range of manga-based katana from a wide range of series, not just one piece, as well as their own original high-end products. These obviously require responsible use. These are not toys, but they do make phenomenal end-of-year gifts for the Zoro fanatic in your life. We all have one. In my case, it's me. You can also have them personally engraved. With crafting and delivery times ranging from 7 to 18 working days and shipping via UPS, you can and should check out Katana Empire through my link in the description. And regardless of whether they're sponsoring the channel or not, you are going to be seeing these swords in future videos because they're just too good not to show off. So do that thing, but for now it's back to you. Me. On the subject of Sakazuki, it's worth remembering that he wasn't actually trying to kill Ace. He was straight up trying to kill Luffy, and Ace jumped in the way. It shows he cares more about what he wants than duty. That's actually a fantastic point. Sakazuki did not go for Ace first, or at all. In fact, he goaded Ace into a clash and used all of the confusion as an opportunity to strike Luffy. So I guess you could say that yes, Sakazuki was prioritizing killing Luffy and Ace just got in the way. It's such a small detail that says so much. And speaking of small details, I've always found it very profound that Luffy was distracted in this moment as well. He dropped Ace's Vivia card and lost all focus on the actual Ace. So when trying to preserve the representation of Ace's life, Luffy put his own life in danger, and thus Ace had to sacrifice his life. I don't really know how differently things would have played out, but I do wonder what would have happened if Luffy decided not to pick up the Vivia card. He didn't need it, the Ace, his Ace was right there. But I'm becoming more and more convinced about Sakazuki's potential backstory with Dragon. There's a solid hatred there that goes beyond him simply being a bad criminalman. Did you notice the cloth around Dragon's leg is the same pattern as the tattoo he would later get? So in that group shot of the Revolutionary Army, you can very clearly see Dragon's future face tattoo currently hugging some thigh, and Oda has made sure to draw it sticking out very prominently as the foreground leg. This isn't the first time we've seen this though. Just in case you missed it, the leg wrap first appeared in chapter 1066 during that short flashback of Dragon and Vegapunk on Ohara, and it definitely has some special meaning. It's not just Dragon's personal sense of aesthetic flair, because eventually he does make the decision to commit to it being on his face. And that's a very bold statement. One idea that often gets tossed around is that either Dragon, Dragon's mother, or Luffy's mother are Shandian, because they sport tattoos in very similar locations across the left eye, so it could have a much deeper historical and cultural meaning. Like, here's a stupid example. Say Dragon was engaged to a Shandian tribe member, and instead of your classic Western engagement ring, Dragon was then given a temporary mark of the tribe to wear. But then, tragedy happens because it's One Piece, Luffy's mother dies, and Dragon makes the full commitment to wear that tattoo every day on his face in her memory and inherited will and such. Something like that. Of course, we'd then have to explain why Luffy doesn't have wings, except for that one volume cover, I guess, where he does actually. And also, he has his left eye closed, which is weird. One Piece analysts have been puzzled by this cover for years and years now because Luffy doesn't wink, ever. I think there's one shot of him doing it during Film Z, which only goes on to prove just how weird it is, because with Luffy, it's blink or nothing. So look, maybe we're heading towards a future where this volume cover completely gave away the game in regards to Luffy's heritage, but today I'm going to say that we're just overthinking things as usual. Based on your points about Sakazuki and Dragon's potential relationship, I wouldn't be surprised if Sakazuki kidnapped Ginny. Entirely plausible. So at this time, Sakazuki is well and truly a vice admiral. He might even be a full admiral, actually. We currently don't know what happened with him at all between the Ohara incident and the Paramount War, and he's already involved in this arc because he confronted Kuma on the Red Line. And I don't mind the idea of Sakazuki capturing Ginny, because it gives the post-war Bonnie situation some nice context. He was the one who was sent to recapture Bonnie, so we have an antagonist fit for the whole family in the making, which is becoming a bit of a Sakazuki trademark, as he's already an antagonist for the entire monkey family. Ginny could have been kidnapped by Germa 66. Alright, this sounds ridiculous out of context, but just stay with me here, because there could be a genuine connection. In the last video, I said that we had no idea what was going on in East Blue 14 years ago. However, we do know what happened 13 years ago. And 13, it is a very close number to 14. In fact, depending on where you are in the current year when you state the number, they can even cross over. And what happened 13 years ago is that the Germa Kingdom scaled the Red Line to invade a kingdom in East Blue. And we even know what that kingdom was called. It was called Kozia or Kojia. The spelling changes depending on whether we're looking at the anime, the manga, or in this case, actually the live action. This is how detailed the live action was. If you look at the various maps they show in the end credits of the episodes, you can see Kozia marked. And it's very close to the Konomi Islands, where Bell-mare raised Nami. And I don't want to jump to conclusions. Wait, no. I would like to jump to a conclusion. Because Kozia does, from the very little we see of it, look a lot like the island that Ginny is on. They share those long, slender, penis-y looking buildings, and also both islands have palm trees, but that is very common for One Piece islands, especially the miscellaneous ones that just need some quick set dressing. At the time, though, the Germa Kingdom was a world government-affiliated nation. So we have a situation where the world government, we're having some trouble with a rebellion in East Blue. Vinsmoke Judge, take care of it now. So the Germa could have been contracted to step in and quell the Revolutionary Army. I mean, it's almost certainly what was happening on Broccoli Island when we were first introduced to Ichiji and Niji. That nation broke out into civil war for 2 whole years, which may have been sparked by the Revolutionary Army. So look, the timeline, it doesn't currently match up perfectly, but this is a story, not actual history, as far as I'm aware. And I think it would be a really fun idea and a great way to keep Judge and the whole Mads aspect integrated into the Egghead arc, especially after we got his whole cover story with Caesar and Stella. It's probably wrong, but it's plausible. And also, it'd be really fun because we might even get just a little tiny hint of Sanji in the flashback as well. So again, it's plausible, which is more than I can say for what's happening on Twitter right now. Because for whatever reason, I cannot escape this image, which you may recognize as Ginny from Harry Potter in her post-time skip form, aka she's now an adult. And currently, Twitter is erupting because it's been discovered that the name of Ginny's actress is Bonnie. And so now this is being used as evidence that Ginny and Bonnie are the same person. It's a genuinely fun coincidence, but no crazier than Australian veteran 10 News reporter Harry Potter, who made a name for himself long before the books did. We even have a Harry Potter award in his honor.
Harry Potter? 10 News.
So Harry Potter, in all of his incarnations aside, the Ginny is Bonnie theory has taken yet another twist. And this time it's all about memories. The idea is that something terrible happens to her while she's captured by our currently unknown enemy. So Ginny is traumatized, ends up eating or even being force-fed the Toshitoshi no Mi, and reverts her age to being a young girl. And when Kuma does eventually rescue her, he takes away the trauma by removing memories for the first time, because we still have yet to see him discover that that's a thing he can do. And maybe maybe he even takes the memories into himself to bear that trauma for Ginny. But as a result, Ginny doesn't remember who she is, so she's been given a hard reset, but she's in a child's body. So what we do is we start again from there, and you're now Bonnie. So they're the same person, but different. And look, I don't know how much I would invest into this, but here is the deep twist, right? Kuma might be gone, or will be gone by the end of Egghead, but Esper is still here, and he is literally Kuma just without the memories. So Bonnie could go on to raise Esper and bring the whole thing full circle. I don't buy into this idea as much because the child Bonnie theory is just looking so solid at the moment. And also, Amnesia doesn't have a great track record in One Piece. Our examples are Big Mom and Sabo, and really, this is a great lesson for any aspiring authors out there. If Eiichiro Oda can't do Amnesia well, then just don't try. This rabbit hole doesn't end, by the way, and this is what I love about Oda's writing, because right now there's room for like 6 or 7 different Ginny theories to coexist. There's now an idea that Ginny was captured by the Marines, made into a slave, and some horrific acts later, ta-da, it's a baby Bonnie, who Kuma then took in and raised in memory of Ginny despite her being part world noble. I think this is even less likely though, because I seriously doubt that Oda would go that dark, because then, you're starting to involve the R word in One Piece, and that's just not that kind of series. So Kuma became a cyborg to feel lesser pain and heal more people. Look, I don't want to believe it, because it continues to make his story that much more tragic, but I could believe it. At some point, Kuma needs a reason to start up his unlikely friendship with Dr. Vegapunk. And as well-intentioned of a lad as he is, I think it's perfectly reasonable to think that he may have asked Vegapunk to augment his body in order to accept more pain, so that he could keep returning to the Sorbet Kingdom and performing his services. And over time, this was too much even for a bulky buccaneer body to handle. Parts of him started failing, falling off, or just plain getting destroyed. And gradually, Kuma was converted into a cyborg. Not out of some extreme world government experiment, but out of necessity for him to continue absorbing people's pain. It may have even reached a point where Kuma was willing to sacrifice parts of his soul so that he could, just feel less, to dull the pain. And here's the most tragic outcome that I can think of right now. What if Kuma isn't going to Egghead Island? What if his final act is to activate and teleport himself back to the Sorbet Kingdom to take all of its citizens' pain and suffering away one last time? His final act is just to help a bunch of old people, and that's where he breaks down for good. It's just such an Oda maneuver for Kuma's conversion to be his idea rather than a world government compromise. And it's something that Stella could ethically do because he's a good guy. He probably doesn't want to help the world government eradicate the existence of the greatest saint to have ever lived, but he will help that saint achieve his mission. If I get in a Grand Line review video, it might help me with my mother issues. Yeah, it's fair enough. Let me know how it goes. I like how Oda contrasts the horrible acts of the Celestial Dragons, who are all called Saint so-and-so, by telling the backstory of an actual saint and martyr with Kuma. Good job, Oda. Kuma is an actual saint. He's a pastor, but he's remembered as a tyrant, which is what the world nobles actually are. It's a complete flip. And also the situation with the Sorbet Kingdom could have been part of what contributed to the Goa Kingdom situation in Luffy's flashback. King Aho Desunen IX said that it was the citizens of the Grey Terminal's fault for not being born as aristocrats, meaning it was their fault for not being born into the resources to pay for the privilege of life. And if I remember correctly, Saint Jalmark went to the Goa Kingdom for an inspection or an investigation, and part of this could have been to conduct a census of the population to determine what the Goa Kingdom's tribute would be. And one way that we can make our kingdom seem a little cleaner and also reduce our taxes is to slaughter a whole ton of poor people. Also, as time goes on, the concept of the pacifista only become more and more twisted to invest into constructing an army of the deadliest weapons in the world, all modeled after someone who was a pacifist and lived his life with the mission to minimize pain and suffering. They also solidify Kuma's legacy as a tyrant because now there's a whole army of tyrants being deployed around the world. The world government really went out of their way to destroy each and every part of this man, his body, his soul, and his legacy. Although even if we do lose Kuma, these pacifista aren't going anywhere, and I wonder if by the end of the series, they'll be put to use performing good deeds for the elderly, and not just these elderly, I mean different elderly, better elderly, by ensuring that each and every nation in this world has its own Kumachi to take away their pain and suffering. Stella could even make a whole line of pacifista with green blood and give them Kuma's fruit ability. And then we could take one step closer to creating a world without suffering, or at least a world where suffering is easily curable, all thanks to one very gentle tyrant. Something else I haven't flagged yet is that the cover page is absolutely adorable. It got me really excited for a second because I thought we might be starting a new cover story, like a different kind of cover story. One where Oda tells a flashback instead of a concurrent plot. I think that sort of thing would be really interesting because it's so difficult to fit detailed backstories into One Piece. The pace just moves way too quickly. But cover stories would be a great opportunity to give us those slower paced moments. Just 5 pages of, Kuma and Ginny's daily life in the Sorbet Kingdom. Because I think that late stage One Piece is really missing those moments of downtime where we get to just sit and spend time with the characters. I mean, I get why Oda does it because I know there were a ton of people complaining that this chapter was boring because all it did was focus on Kuma instead of the hype of God Valley and such. But at the risk of sounding like a contrarian, I liked this chapter better than the God Valley one. Because even though, yes, it's a bit slower, it's putting the pieces together and painting a very vivid picture of one of the biggest enigmas in all of One Piece. And maybe cover stories would be a great way to expand on that without interrupting the fast pace of the main plot. Like a series dedicated to Kaido's path to joining the Rocks Pirates. Or maybe even characters who will never be relevant again, like the exploits of Golden Lion Shiki. Also, at first I couldn't figure out what Ginny was holding. It took me a pretty embarrassingly long time to realize that it was Kuma's glove, which is such a great way of showing their scale. Ginny's hand makes Kuma's glove look like a squid, or I guess a series of well-milked gigantic cow udders. This idea comes from Mr. Morge's live chat, but I'm going to build on the idea. I now think Kumachi will pop up on Egghead and push all the pain out of Luffy and take it all on himself. I mean, what more could you really hope for in Kuma's position? At the very end of his life, with the bare minimum shred of consciousness remaining, Kuma finally gets to see the sun god Nika that his father told him about. And he also gets to hear the drums of liberation, the dum, which is lovely because then he knows that everything he did was for a reason. And he can move on now. He can go and die peacefully because Nika's here and everything's gonna be okay, probably. Gear 5th Luffy then returns to peak fighting form, Kizaru remains on the floor, and we can all escape Egghead and say, hooray. And it would be a really bittersweet moment because Kuma would die, but he would die satisfied. That, or he'd see Luffy on the floor just like Thriller Bark, then look towards Zoro and go, do you want to take this instead? No, I thought not. Don't worry, mate. This one's on me. And thus endeth the life and times of Bartholomew, middle name Kuma. Also, thanks again to Katana Empire for sponsoring the channel. Genuinely cool products, please do check them out, link in the description.